All I was worried about was that it would be good, the one segment.
When Bea Arthur died in 2009, the world mourned a comedy legend. But they had no idea what she'd been hiding. For years, she denied her own military service. She erased parts of her past completely. Even worse, the government tried to erase her too. In 2025, her military records mysteriously disappeared from official websites. When fans fought back, the truth got uglier. What they found wasn't just about covering up her service, it was about covering up who she really was. The real Bea Arthur was nothing like Dorothy. Bea Arthur was born as Bernice Frankel on May 13, 1922, in Brooklyn, New York. Her parents, Philip and Rebecca, were Jewish immigrants who had fled Europe hoping for a better life. But they arrived during the Great Depression, and nothing came easy. They ran a small women's clothing store and did everything they could to stay afloat. When the family's money troubles worsened, they left Brooklyn and moved to Cambridge, Maryland, hoping to restart their dressmaking business. But the move brought new problems. Cambridge was a mostly Christian town, and the Frankels were one of the few Jewish families there. Bernice was bullied terribly for her religion, but also for her height. By high school, she was nearly 5'10", and classmates didn't let her forget it. She felt like an outsider almost everywhere she went. But instead of shrinking, she fought back with sharp humor and a voice that could cut through any room. She even became known for her hilarious Mae West impressions. In the end, her classmates gave her the title of wittiest girl. That was the beginning of something powerful. She had learned how to turn pain into punchlines. Then came February 18th, 1943. Just 5 days after the Marine Corps opened its doors to women, 21-year-old Bernice signed up. It was a bold, almost shocking move. She asked to be a truck driver, even though she had probably never driven a car before. But she didn't care. She served for 2.5 years, doing everything from dispatch work to medical assistance. She moved up the ranks fast. Private first class in May, corporal in July, sergeant in December, and staff sergeant by January 1945. One of her superiors called her officious, but admitted she got things done. During service, she married a fellow Marine named Robert Allen Arthur. But the marriage didn't last long. They divorced after she contracted an STD. She kept his last name, but changed the spelling to Arthur. Later in life, she denied she ever served in the military at all. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe it was the shame. But she buried that part of her past. After she was discharged in September 1945, she decided to become an actress. In 1947, she enrolled in the dramatic workshop at the New School in New York City. It wasn't just any acting school. The man running it was Erwin Piscator, a German director who had fled the Nazis. She studied alongside names that would later become legends: Marlon Brando, Tony Curtis, Walter Matthau, Elaine Stritch. The school was booming thanks to the GI Bill, and it became one of the biggest acting hubs in America. Inside that small building on West 12th Street, future icons were learning their craft. Bea was right in the middle of it. That same year, she made her first professional appearance at the Cherry Lane Theater in Greenwich Village. She was just 25. The theater was tiny, only 179 seats, and the pay was tiny too. She earned $15 a week. But her voice filled the room, no microphone needed. She played a role in Yerma by Federico Garcia Lorca, and even though the show only ran for 6 weeks, critics remembered her. Something about her stood out. She was taller, louder, sharper, and unforgettable. In March 1954, everything changed. Bea played Lucy Brown in the Threepenny Opera at the Théâtre de Lys. It started as a short run, but audiences couldn't get enough. The show came back just a year later, and ended up running for over 2,600 performances, 6 years straight. That made it the longest-running off-Broadway show at the time. Her weekly pay rose from $70 to $150, but she still had to hustle to survive. During the early 1950s, Bea worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. By day, she tested blood samples in a lab for just $35 a week. At night, she sang and did comedy routines at a club called the Blue Angel for about $25 a gig. When things got really tough, she worked as a truck driver's assistant moving furniture in Queens for $2 a day. None of her theater friends knew. She kept it hidden because she didn't want them to think she wasn't serious about acting. In 1950, she quietly married Gene Saks, a director she had met during acting workshops. Their marriage lasted 28 years. They adopted their first son, Matthew, in 1961, when Bea was 39. Their second son, Daniel, came in 1964. Bea was 42. At the time, adoption was rare for theater couples, and she was considered old to become a mother. But she juggled everything: rehearsals, shows, and motherhood. Saks would later direct her in Mame, the show that earned her a Tony. In 1955, she performed in a tiny show called The Shoestring Revue. The crowd was small. Tickets cost only $250. But one night, a young TV producer named Norman Lear sat in the audience. He watched Bea perform a song called Garbage, a satire about waste and consumerism. Lear never forgot her. 16 years later, when he needed someone to play the sharp, liberal cousin on All in the Family, he thought of Bea. That moment would eventually lead to Maude, one of the most groundbreaking sitcoms in history. It all started with that one night. In 1964, Bea played Yente the Matchmaker in Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway. The show ran for over 3,200 performances. Even though her role was small, she stole scenes with her timing, her presence, and her voice. In 1966, she took on a new role that would change her career. She played Vera Charles in Mame next to Angela Lansbury. The show opened in May and ran for over 1,500 performances. Critics called her performance brilliant, and the Tony Committee agreed. She won Best Featured Actress in a Musical in 1966. Her husband, Gene Saks, directed it, and she and Angela Lansbury became close friends for life. But not every show was a hit. In 1968, Bea starred in a musical called A Mother's Kisses. It never made it to Broadway. It folded after just 2 tryouts in Philadelphia and Boston. She had one song in the show, There Goes My Life, that she later performed at the Tony Awards in 1974. If that musical had succeeded, she might never have done Maude. Her personal life began to unravel during this time. The strain between her and Gene grew worse during Mom. They separated, and by 1978, their marriage ended. She never married again. She poured herself into her career and into raising her sons. And television welcomed her with open arms. It all began with a phone call during a regular evening on December 11, 1971. As the East Coast was still watching All in the Family, CBS executive Fred Silverman picked up the phone and dialed producer Norman Lear. The episode that night featured Bea Arthur as Maude Findlay, a sharp-tongued liberal cousin who clashed with the famously conservative Archie Bunker. Silverman didn't wait for the episode to end. He simply said, "There's a series in that woman." And he was right. What was supposed to be just a guest appearance turned into a cultural force. Bea Arthur, who hated flying and nearly turned down the role, ended up becoming the face of a show that pushed boundaries like no sitcom had ever dared to do. 1 year later, in November 1972, Bea Arthur found herself in the middle of one of the most controversial moments in television history. The 2-part episode was called Maude's Dilemma. Her character, at 47 years old, found out she was pregnant. and made the decision to have an abortion. At the time, the idea of airing such a storyline was almost unthinkable. The writers initially toyed with other ideas like vasectomies, but Norman Lear insisted it had to be Maude herself going through it. The goal wasn't shock, it was to start a conversation. And it did. While the episodes sent ratings soaring, they also triggered nationwide outrage that haunted television networks for years. But Bea Arthur didn't back down. She played Maude as someone who was conflicted, thoughtful, and real. The decision wasn't easy for the character, and that's exactly why it hit so hard. Bea's performance earned her more than controversy. It earned her respect. In 1977, she won the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. Between 1973 and 1978, she was nominated 5 times for the Golden Globe and won all 5. Over the years, she racked up 9 Emmy nominations in total, placing her just behind legends like Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Mary Tyler Moore. The show Maude tackled menopause, aging, financial pressure, and sexual harassment, all while balancing biting comedy and heartfelt drama. When she was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame in 2008, it was long overdue. Her impact had already reshaped what television could talk about. But before all that, Bea had proven herself on the big screen. In 1970, she starred in Lovers and Other Strangers, a wedding comedy that became a surprise box office hit. It made $7.7 million on a $2.5 million budget and ended up launching careers. Diane Keaton made her film debut in it. Richard Castellano was nominated for an Oscar. Bea Arthur, in a smaller role, still managed to shine. Her comic timing was sharp, and even among stars like Gig Young and Cloris Leachman, she held her ground. Then came something truly bizarre. On November 17, 1978, Bea appeared in the Star Wars Holiday Special, a show so strange and disastrous that CBS refused to ever air it again. She played a bar owner named Akmina and sang a surreal farewell song while aliens danced around her. The special became legendary for all the wrong reasons. Carrie Fisher used to joke that it was her go-to tape when she wanted guests to leave her house. Bea herself admitted she had no real interest in Star Wars, but she said yes as a favor to her friends Ken and Mitzi Welch, who had written the segment. Despite how odd the whole thing was, she still gave it her all, and the disaster only added to her myth. Not everything she touched turned to gold, though. In 1981, Bea returned to Broadway in The Floating Light Bulb, a play written by Woody Allen. It was personal, quiet, and ultimately a flop. The production closed after just 62 performances. Critics were underwhelmed, calling it forgettable. Even with Bea's strong presence, the story just didn't land. 2 years later, she tried again with a new sitcom called Amanda's. It was a remake of Fawlty Towers, but with all the clever parts removed. The creators had erased the character of Basil entirely and shoved all the lines onto Bea. The show was canceled after only a few months. She later said she was disappointed by the whole thing. But as it turned out, this flop was a blessing. It made room for something legendary. On September 14, 1985, The Golden Girls premiered, and everything changed again. Bea played Dorothy Zbornak, a strong, sarcastic woman with a tender heart buried under her deadpan delivery. The show ran for 7 seasons and became one of the most beloved sitcoms of all time. It ranked in Nielsen's top 10 almost every year and finished with 180 episodes. In 1988, Bea won another Emmy for her role, making The Golden Girls one of only 4 sitcoms where every lead actress won the award. When the show ended in 1992 with Dorothy's wedding to Lucas, played by Leslie Nielsen, millions tuned in. It was the perfect ending to a perfect run. but the decision to leave was hers. Bea felt the show's quality was slipping. She was nearly 70 and tired of the jokes about Dorothy being big and unattractive. Those jokes had started to wear her down. She refused to join the spin-off The Golden Palace, and instead chose to bow out with grace. Long before she became a TV legend, Bea had already been shaping her own path. Back in 1944, while serving in the Marines, she married Robert Allen Arthur. The marriage lasted only 3 years, but the name stuck. She kept it, changed the spelling, and turned it into her stage identity. After divorcing Robert, she married director Gene Saks in 1950, just as her career was taking off. Their marriage lasted decades, and in the early 60s, they adopted 2 sons, Matthew in 1961 and Daniel in 1964. Bea was careful about family. She didn't parade her kids in front of the cameras, even while starring in shows that pushed every social boundary. Her son Matthew later said that no matter how busy she was, she always made time for dinner at home. Later in life, Bea made a personal decision that didn't go as planned. She got a facelift, hoping to refresh her appearance, but the results left her bruised and swollen. Most people would have gone into hiding. Bea didn't. Not long after the surgery, she got a call to appear at a political fundraiser for the No on 6 campaign, which fought against anti-gay legislation in California. Even with her face still healing, she showed up. She wore bandages, bruises, and all. When asked why, she said the cause was more important than what she looked like. That moment said more about her than any award ever could. She was a fighter, a woman of principle, and someone who never let vanity get in the way of doing what was right. In February 2002, Bea Arthur walked barefoot onto the stage of the Booth Theater in New York, stood next to a piano, sat on a chair, and quietly began telling stories. She was 78. The show was called Just Between Friends, and for 65 performances, she made the audience laugh, remember, and reflect. There were no big lights or dancers, just Bea, her pianist Billy Goldenberg, and a voice that somehow felt like both thunder and velvet. Before Broadway, she had taken this show to 26 cities across the country. It became a love letter to the life she had lived, filled with songs and stories from her long career. Some people paid $50, others paid $65, but everyone left with the same feeling, that Bea Arthur still had something to say. That same year, her performance earned her a Tony nomination. A live recording from a 2001 show in West Palm Beach was released soon after, capturing a final moment of magic. Behind the stage lights and applause, Bea had started using her fame for more than storytelling. As the years passed, she quietly became a powerful voice for causes close to her heart. She believed in justice, equality, and speaking up for the ones who couldn't. Her political stance was never hidden. From her bold character as Maud Findlay to her presence at progressive fundraisers, she stood firm. The details of her work with AIDS research weren't always splashed across newspapers, but people around her knew how serious she was about it. And those who needed help, especially those on the margins, knew that Bea Arthur was on their side. In 2005, when she was 83, Bea returned to television one last time. This time it was a guest role on Malcolm in the Middle, where she played a strict babysitter with the same dry, piercing humor that had made her a legend. She didn't need much screen time. Just her presence was enough to remind people why she had become one of TV's most unforgettable faces. It was the final chapter in a television journey that had started way back in the early 1970s, with All in the Family. But once the lights dimmed and retirement settled in, Bea struggled with something she rarely talked about: loneliness, depression, the quiet sadness that often follows people when the applause fades and the routines stop. She had built her entire identity around work. And when it ended, the silence felt heavier than expected. Even though she smiled in interviews and brought humor to every stage she walked on, her friends knew the truth. She missed the world she once ruled. In 2008, when she appeared at the TV Land Awards at age 86, the signs were hard to miss. Frail and quiet, she leaned on Betty White and Rue McClanahan for support. That night, she was honored with an induction into the Hall of Fame and received a Pop Culture Icon Award for the Golden Girls. But those close to her could tell she wasn't well. Something had shifted. Her steps were slower. Her grip was weaker. Then came the news no one expected. In early 2009, Bea was diagnosed with lung cancer. She told almost no one. Even in her final days, she protected her privacy fiercely. She stayed in her Los Angeles home, kept mostly to herself, and relied on a morphine drip for the pain. Her last words, whispered quietly, were filled with sadness. "I don't want people to see me this way." On April 25, 2009, at the age of 86, she died peacefully, surrounded by her two sons, Matthew and Daniel. There was no funeral, no ceremony, just ashes scattered at sea, exactly how she wanted. On April 28th, Broadway dimmed its lights at 8 p.m. to honor her. Years later, in June 2025, fans were hit with a revelation that shook their memories of her. During a Pride panel celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Golden Girls, co-producer Marsha Posner Williams stunned the crowd by revealing that Bea had often used a hateful slur, the C word, when talking about Betty White. She didn't just say it once, she said it over the phone. She said it at her dinner table. Even casting director Joel Thurm confirmed hearing it on a flight with her. It wasn't just professional tension, it was something sharper, something personal. The clash went far beyond words. Williams explained that Bea came from the theater, trained to respect scripts and timing, while Betty White came from live television, often breaking character to engage the audience. Bea couldn't stand that. She didn't see it as acting, she saw it as disrespect. According to Williams, Bea once joked, those two couldn't warm up to each other if they were cremated together. Her own son, Matthew Sachs, later admitted that his mother seemed to enjoy having someone to be angry at. And Betty, with her endless optimism, was the perfect target. Even Betty herself said in 2011 that Bea probably saw her as a pain in the neck. This tension led to the show's premature end in 1992. The Golden Girls was still a hit, still winning awards, still loved by over 20 million viewers every week. But when NBC asked the cast to renew their contracts, Bea flatly refused. "No in way," she told the producers. Everyone else had agreed to keep going. Rue, Estelle, and Betty were ready for more. But Bea walked away, and just like that, one of the greatest sitcoms in TV history was over. It wasn't burnout, it wasn't money, it was Betty White. Still, in their final years, something seemed to soften. Script supervisor Isabel O'Mero remembered the two women walking arm in arm after tapings. They may not have been close friends, but they worked like professionals. And when Bea passed in 2009, Betty White's words were filled with grace. How lucky I was to know her. Maybe it was reconciliation, maybe it was just respect. But either way, the show had remained untouched by the feud. That illusion shattered in 2025 when the details became public. Fans were split. Some wished the truth had never come out. Others felt they finally understood the tension they'd always sensed. Marsha Williams defended sharing the truth, saying it had been an open secret among the crew for decades. Suddenly, The Golden Girls wasn't just a show about friendship. It was a show built on brilliant performances hiding very real resentment. Then came another shock. In March 2025, Bea Arthur's military service record, once proudly displayed on the Department of Defense website, vanished. It wasn't a glitch. It was part of a broader purge of diversity and inclusion records. Bea had enlisted as Bernice Frankel on February 18, 1943, just 5 days after women were allowed to join the Marines. She worked as a typist in Washington, D.C., trained as a truck driver, and rose to the rank of staff sergeant before being honorably discharged in September 1945. For a long time, that page told the world what she had done. Then, it disappeared. Within days, outrage flooded social media. The deletion gathered over 900,000 views. Finally, on March 25th, the DoD quietly put the page back online, hoping no one would notice. But Bea's legacy couldn't be erased. Not by politics, not by time. Her will revealed a heart that had never stopped giving. She left $300,000 to the Ali Forney Center, the country's largest shelter for homeless LGBTQ+ youth. That money kept the organization alive through the 2008 recession and funded the opening of the Bea Arthur residence in February 2017. She also gave $25,000 to the AIDS Services Foundation of Orange County. Even after death, she was helping others. Co-founder Ken Gilson put it simply, "After all these years, she's still doing wonderful things." Bea Arthur wasn't just Maude. She wasn't just Dorothy. She wasn't just the woman who made us laugh. She was a complicated, passionate, deeply private person who loved hard, held grudges longer than most, and fought for the things she believed in until the very end. Behind the glare of the spotlight was a woman who never stopped trying to make the world a little better, even if it meant doing it barefoot on a stage or silently from behind closed doors.